Hey everyone, it's Rebecca, and today I'm in my kitchen and I'm getting ready to mix up some sourdough to make some muffins tomorrow. And I just kind of wanted to tell you a little bit about my method of how I use sourdough and how I make it work for me. So I've been using sourdough for well over a decade now. I've gone through different phases with it. I did whole wheat for a while, I did white flour, and now I've kind of settled on Einkorn flour, which I really like. But I've found that people have a lot of questions about it. They like to ask me about Einkorn. You give them some starter and then they kind of don't know what to do with it. So I just want to make this video just to tell you how I feed mine and how I use it. Now there's many different methods out there. You'll find tons and tons of information on the internet, and people just do what works for them. And like I said, this is just what works for me. So currently I'm using this Einkorn sourdough starter. You can see it's got a little bit of a yellowness to it. And you see that there's actually quite a bit of bubbles in there because I just fed this last week and put it back in the fridge, and it's just been rising in there since then. This is another starter I have. This is a white flour starter. Still got a little bit of bubbles in it, but you can see it's got that gray liquid on top. I haven't used this in a couple months, but that is called hooch, and all I will do is just pour that off and refeed this, and the starter will be good to go even after it's been in the fridge for several months. So I'll show you that in a minute. But like I said, I'm getting ready to make some muffins tomorrow, and that muffin batter is calling for 1 1/2 cups of active starter. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to feed, let's see, this is about 1/2 cup of starter in here, and it's a little bit risen, so I'll be a little bit less than that. So I'm just going to feed it to be about 1 1/2 to 2 cups on my glass measuring cup here, and that way I know I'll have 1.5 cups to use for my batter, and I will have a little bit left over that I can put back in the jar for later, because that's the thing with sourdoughs, you always want to make sure you have some left over for the next time. So I'm going to feed this with Einkorn flour and non-chlorinated water. I use water just out of my refrigerator because it's filtered out of my refrigerator. You can also use like you can buy spring water or purified water and use that, and that's fine. And but you just don't want it chlorinated, and you don't want your flour to be bleached because that can kill your starter off. So I've got my starter here. You can see it's kind of gotten kind of thick on top. I'm just going to put this in here. I don't typically measure this. I just kind of go by feel. So I'm just going to put about 1 cup or so of flour in there, and then I'm just going to mix in my water, and I'm just going to kind of see what it looks like from there and see if I need to add any more flour or any more water. And you want to kind of get that starter in there, especially if it's real thick like mine was. You want to get it really broken up and mixed in there and get a lot of air mixed into it so it can start working into that other flour. So there was about 1/2 cup of starter in my jar, and you always want to feed it more than is in the jar. Like I wouldn't want to just feed it maybe 1/4 cup. You always want to double at least what's in the jar. It's even better to like triple or quadruple it. It just kind of works better if you do it that way. So I'm just going to get this really good and mixed up. See how much I've got in here. I've got almost 1.5 cups. I'm going to need a little bit more than that. Now it is going to rise. You always want to make sure you put it in a container that you've got plenty of room, because it's going to rise up quite a bit in there. So that's kind of loosening it up, and it's getting to a good consistency. A little bit more water. And let's see where we're at. Add in get some air mixed in there. You just want to get it mixed up really good. Let's see. Yeah, we got right at 1.5 cups. So I'm just going to add a little bit more so I make sure I have plenty of extra. And if something were to happen and you were to accidentally use all your starter and there wasn't any left, what you can do is you can even, if you just got a dirty bowl that you haven't washed out, you can even scrape it down off the sides and mix it with some flour, and it will usually just make another starter for you. So that's what it looks like. I'm just going to cover this and I'm going to let it sit out overnight, and then it's going to be ready to go in the morning. I'm going to do the white flour starter also to show you that. So I'm just going to pour off this gray liquid on here. So I'm just going to feed this one as well. I don't really have any plans for it, but I may make some little flatbreads or something with it. And I just want to go ahead and get it fed since it had all that hooch on it. It's good to just kind of go ahead and feed it if you haven't done that in a while. All right, so I'm just going to cover that one up as well. And so when I first started doing sourdough, the methods that I was using was recommending adding 1 part water, 1 part flour to your starter, and that's how you would feed it. And what I found was that my starter was just too sour. My dough, when I would make bread, it just wasn't good. It was too sour and we didn't like it. And eventually I found the method of feeding it more flour than water and keeping it really thick. And I just found that works so much better, especially I think where we live, it's super hot and humid. So the starter works a little bit quicker and it can eat all that up and then turn sour really quickly. And so that's what you don't want, is you don't want your sourdough, if you leave it out too long, if you leave it out a couple days, it's going to get really sour if you haven't fed it, and then it's not going to taste good for bread, and it's also not going to be active. So what I do is as soon as I get done using my starter, I just refeed it, and then I stick it in the fridge, and it slowly ferments in there, and that makes it to where it's not as sour. And a lot of times people, when they're making bread, they actually ferment it in the fridge on the last rise, and that helps it develop a slower ferment, and it develops a little bit more of a better taste. So I've been doing sourdough well over a decade now. I've killed a lot of sourdough and I've made it bad, and I eventually learned to make it good, like I said, using the method of putting it in the fridge and feeding it more flour than water. That's worked super well for me. And then, you know, I have done whole wheat. I did that for a while. I ground our own wheat, and I did yeast bread with that for a while, and then I did sourdough. Then I went gluten-free for some time because I couldn't tolerate it very well. My kids have all had different degrees of sensitivities when they were little with wheat, and so I would use spelt and other grains and stuff like that. And then eventually I found Einkorn, and that's mostly what you'll see me bake with in most of my recipes and stuff now. It is grown in Italy, and it's basically, it's never been hybridized. It's kind of like the original wheat, and it's a lot easier for most people to digest. Even some people that can't digest regular wheat, they can tolerate Einkorn so much better. And I find that I can, and my daughter can also. My oldest daughter, we eat gluten-free when we're out, and then when we're at home, we just make stuff with Einkorn, and it works really well for us. Now it is a bit pricey, and so when I'm making stuff for other people that don't really care about that type of thing, I will use just like that's why I have the white starter. Like at Christmas, I made some little loaves and put some jam in some boxes for people and did that just for fun. And I like to use an organic all-purpose flour when I'm doing that. So that's what I've landed on. Like I said, that's worked really well for us. And even, you know, our boys, they tolerate regular flour pretty well. So sometimes if I'm just making some stuff and I want it to be a little bit cheaper, I'll just make them up some stuff with white flour, and that works pretty well. So I do know that a lot of people will just leave their starter out and they feed it every day. And if you're using your starter all the time, that works out really well. Like some people like to get up, have it ready, and make pancakes in the mornings and things like that. If you're using your starter a lot, possibly, you know, several times a week, then that works out really well. But if you're not, if you're just baking once a week or once every couple of weeks like I'm doing, keeping it in the fridge and then just getting it out when you need it, I think works the best. So that's what I do. That's my method. Like I said, just keep it in the fridge, and I don't have to tend to it. I don't have to do anything with it. I just pull it out the night before when I need it. So I'm going to show you those muffins I'm going to make tomorrow. We'll show you how it rises. You can see now this is right here on this, and then this one is right below the 2-cup mark, and we'll see how they rise in the morning. So this is the sourdough starter the night before, and I put a line there on it to see how much it rose. You can see there's not a lot of bubbles in it. And then this is it the next day. It actually doesn't look like it rose that much, but you can see the bubbles in it. It probably rose and then fell back down, but like I said, you can see it's nice and active. It's going to have a nice, sweet, soury smell to it. It's not overpowering, and then you'll know that it's working properly. And so we're just going to get ready to make our muffins now. So this muffin recipe was new to me. I had just seen it on Instagram and wanted to try it. It was called a savory muffin recipe, and it was from Nourish the Littles. And so if you want to find it, you can look her up on Instagram. I didn't find that we loved this recipe. It was just okay. My kids didn't really like it. I found that with quick breads like muffins and stuff, they don't really like them to be sourdough. They mostly like the sourdough in bread and stuff like that. But this was a fun recipe to try. I like doing it the savory because I normally make sweet muffins, and I'm just using this brownie pan. I like to use it to make muffins in, just kind of make square muffins, and it's something fun and a little bit different, and so I just like to use that for muffins sometimes, and there was extra dough, so I just put it in this other pan, and I'm going to cook them up. So while that's getting ready to go in the oven, I'm just going to go ahead and feed the starter that's left in there, and I'm going to feed it really thick, and I didn't even have to add any water to that. I just added flour, and I just need to make sure that's less than half of that jar because it will rise up in there. So I just fed it thick, put it in the fridge, and now I've got this white flour starter that, like I said, I didn't really have any plans for. So I'm just going to make what looks like pancakes, but it's not going to taste like pancakes because it's not going to be sweet. It's just going to be starter. So it's going to kind of have a sourness to it, and I'm just heating up my iron skillet. I put a little olive oil in there, heated that up, and then I'm just putting these in there like pancakes, and I'm going to flip them over and just brown them on either side. And I'm going to feed that white sourdough starter again as well, and put it in my jar and put it back in the fridge while that's cooking. You can see the bubbles coming up on those little flatbreads there. My kids actually really like this. It does have a sourness to it, but they really like it. Today they ate it with syrup like pancakes. Sometimes they might put jam on them. You could like even fold it over like kind of like a pita or something and put like sandwich stuff in it. So that's really good. Now I just rinsed out my cast iron and I re-season it with some olive oil or sometimes some coconut oil. Did that while it's still hot, and it'll kind of bake into there and keep it seasoned well. My muffins are done, so I'm going to grab them out and get them out of the pan. They actually came out really nicely since I went ahead and buttered that pan. It is non-stick, but it tends to stick even though it is non-stick. That Einkorn sticks worse. So I hope you can see how easy it is to feed and maintain a sourdough starter. And if you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll try to answer them. I'm definitely not an expert, but I do have some experience. And if you found this video valuable, consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day.